If you found yourself obsessing over every mistake, trying relentlessly to do everything perfectly just to avoid the storm of blame and ridicule in your family, you're living the scapegoat's perfectionism trap. Maybe you spent hours rewriting assignments until your handwriting was flawless, or rehearsed conversations in your head dozens of times before speaking, or pushed yourself to exhaustion trying to meet impossible standards that somehow never seemed good enough. Welcome back to the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast. I'm Lynn, your host. Today we're talking about how perfectionism becomes a survival mechanism for scapegoats, and why that relentless drive to be flawless isn't actually about excellence, it's about protection. In narcissistic family systems, perfectionism isn't just about high standards, it's armor. The scapegoat, already blamed and ostracized, often adopts extreme perfectionism, hoping to stop the endless criticism and avoid becoming an even easier target. You learned early that making mistakes meant facing rage, mockery, or complete dismissal. So you developed this internal system that said if you could just be perfect enough, maybe the attacks would stop. But here's what's really happening. Narcissistic parents and siblings wield impossible expectations that are never truly about your success. They're about maintaining control and having a dumping ground for their own flaws and insecurities. When they set these standards, they're not hoping you'll meet them. They're creating conditions where failure is inevitable, so they always have ammunition. The scapegoat's perfectionism shows up everywhere. You might have experienced the exhaustion of rewriting every text message 3 times before sending it, or the panic when you realize you made a small error at work, convinced everyone will see you as incompetent. Maybe you felt that crushing weight of knowing that while others in your family got praise for mediocre efforts, you had to be exceptional just to avoid criticism. This perfectionism often carries into adulthood in ways that feel productive but are actually self-destructive. You might take on excessive responsibilities at work, convinced you have to prove your worth constantly. You might agonize over social interactions, replaying conversations and wondering if you said something wrong. Or you might have this internal critic that sounds suspiciously like your family's voice, telling you nothing you do is ever quite good enough. What makes this particularly insidious is that perfectionism can look like a strength from the outside. People praise your attention to detail, your high standards, your work ethic. But you know the truth. It's not coming from a place of genuine excellence or passion. It's coming from terror. Terror of being seen as flawed, incompetent, or worthy of the treatment you received. The scapegoat's perfectionism is also exhausting because the goalposts always move. You achieve something you thought would finally prove your worth, but instead of recognition, you get new criticisms or higher demands. That's because the system was never designed for your success. It was designed to keep you striving, depleted, and convinced the problem was your effort level rather than their impossible standards. You might recognize this pattern in how you approach relationships too. Maybe you overanalyze every interaction, wondering if you're being too much or not enough. You might find yourself constantly adjusting your behavior based on others' reactions, never quite trusting that you're acceptable as you are. This hypervigilance around being perfect becomes a prison where you can never relax into being human. Here's what's crucial to understand. Your perfectionism developed because you were forced to carry impossible weight to shield yourself from further abuse. In a healthy family system, children are allowed to make mistakes, learn, and grow without facing character assassination. They're supported through failures and celebrated for efforts, not just outcomes. But you didn't get that foundation. Instead, you got a system that demanded perfection while never offering genuine acceptance. The reality is that no amount of perfection would have changed how they treated you. The golden child could make the same mistakes you agonized over and receive understanding or excuses. Your perfectionism wasn't failing because you weren't trying hard enough. It was failing because the system was rigged against you from the start. This is why it's so important to recognize perfectionism as a trauma response, not a character trait. You developed these patterns because you had to. Your nervous system learned that hypervigilance and flawless execution meant survival in that environment. But what helped you survive then might be limiting you now. You weren't the problem. The system demanded your perfection while never offering the safety, acceptance, or genuine love that every person deserves. Your worth was never actually tied to your performance, no matter how convincingly they sold you that lie. You deserved care and acceptance simply for existing, mistakes and all. The exhaustion you feel from trying to be perfect all the time. That's your system telling you this isn't sustainable. The anxiety that comes with making small errors. That's your body remembering a time when mistakes felt dangerous. But you're not in that environment anymore, even if your nervous system sometimes forgets. When did you first notice perfectionism showing up as a shield against family expectations? And how did trying to be perfect impact your sense of who you really are? Take some time to think about when that internal critic developed and whose voice it really sounds like. You might be surprised by what you discover about the difference between healthy standards and survival-based perfectionism. Thanks so much for listening today. If scapegoating has been part of your story, know that you're not alone in this and healing is absolutely possible. I want to let you know about a few resources that can support you on this journey. First, if you're finding value in these episodes, we have ad-free versions available plus bonus content over on Supercast. You can check that out at narcissisticabuserecovery.supercast.com. It's a great way to dive deeper into these topics without interruptions. And if you're dealing with trauma that's stored in your body, somatic healing can be incredibly powerful. We've created 3 different audio healing sessions to help you release that stored tension and reconnect with yourself. There's a 10-minute somatic encounter to help you reconnect with your body, reclaim your power, and find your ground. We have a 25-minute intensive that's a somatic audio journey for letting go of stored grief and rage, and that one includes a transcript PDF. And there's a 45-minute intensive for deep mother and father healing. It's called The Body Remembers, and it's a deep somatic reset for women healing from emotional abandonment. You can get each of these individually or grab them all bundled together at our Gumroad store. That's waketheelephant.gumroad.com. This is Lynn, and this has been another episode of the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast. I'll see you in the next episode. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The content shared is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, please seek help from a qualified professional or contact a local crisis hotline.